Diversity and Inclusion Working Group at the Mercury Alumni Association. And today we brought together a panel of experts and enablers of talent, international talent mobility, to discuss an inventory of basically opportunities, challenges, and future plans for a responsible brain circulation within Europe and beyond. I will give the word to Marta to present the panel, and from there we can kick.
Thank you, Nadia. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marta, and it's an honor to be here, especially introducing Helena Gómez Macpherson. She is from Córdoba, but her international experience is amazing. So, briefly, she's an agriculture engineer. She did her PhD in Canberra in Australia. Then after she moved into Syria, into California. She did a postdoc in California. Then she's been working in Syria too. She worked in the FAO, the Food Alimentation Organization in Rome too. As you can see, she has a very strong connections with Africa, with the Sahel project too. And currently her position is here in Córdoba in the CSIC. She's an expert in sustainable agriculture. And we are honored to have someone with such an international experience to talk about such a complicated topic like it is brain drain or gain inventory of challenges and solutions. So please welcome Helena. Thank you.
Thank you, Marta, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me today to this session that I found quite important. I mean, I wish we could have something like this many years ago when I started moving around. In our group, in spite of the title, we prefer to talk about brain circulation. And certainly brain circulation is, we all agree, it's essential for the training of young scientists. But also, I would say, for more mature scientists and groups, And the mobility and moving around, really, it's what enriched a group and the science and the quality. And I think we all agree in that. The problem is when this mobility results in an imbalance, and we have some areas receiving a lot of researchers and others that get less and less. This deficit of high qualified, let's say, people can be very detrimental for the society. The thing is how to avoid this, how counteract this wrong effects of the mobility. And I think there are important role of the policies and even at different level, not only national or European, but also at universities or research institutions. And today we will look at the challenges we face, to the opportunities, to the benefits, and also to the future. And for this we have 3 experts covering different areas and expertise that I think will enrich our discussion. To start with, we have Carmen Mendez. She is PhD in sociology and political sciences at the University of the Basque Country, and have worked on issues related to transnational mobility, identity, analysis on Erasmus, graduate style life, among other things. She had experience, international experiences with the Netherlands, UK, USA, and she's currently Senior International Mobility Advisor and is the head of the BBasque Dual Career Center of Vizcaya Talent, as well as Euro Access Service Center in the Basque Country in Spain, supporting researchers and professionals' mobility as well as their social integration. And apart from that, she promotes cooperation agreements for the regional setting, a repatriation of talent, and The main areas of interest include intercultural issues, international sociocultural integration, global talent, mobility, and labor market issues for researchers and qualified personnel. Carmen, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Helena. I totally agree with you that brain drain and brain gain, those concepts are already old-fashioned. But just to introduce a bit the topic from my experience is that almost 2 decades ago, we were talking about that. And not only regions, different countries, they were telling about that. And I was honored that in my region, I had the challenge of being part of a regional strategy in order to create all those conditions to attract those talented researchers, and why not to promote the economy of a region or of a company. As Helena has said, I started analyzing the situation, that I will talk about that later on, and created some services to support the researchers and, of course, the institutions. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Carmen. Let me introduce you now, Jenny Lynn Elmaco. She's current chair of the Marie Curie Alumni Association in Southeast Asia. She was awarded the Double Gold in Education and Global Diamond Award in Innovation from the Global Women Inventors and Innovators Network, and the Marie Curie Social Impact Award for her work in peace, gender, digital inclusion, and COVID response. Jenny has been very active in science diplomacy, security, and international development work. She is on the United Nations Standing Committee for the International Federation for Business and Professional Women, which she represents as an official delegate in the United Nations Council of the Status of Women meetings in New York. She's a regional representative of Euroaccess worldwide, and she's also an NCP for the EU program, the Marie Curie Actions, European Research Council, and Research Infrastructures. Jenny, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Helena, and very nice to see everybody and the diversity, especially in the room. So I am Jen. Don't ask me where I am from. Ask me where I am a local. To borrow the words of one of my favorite speakers, Taiye Selassie. And that is because I think at the onset, what I want to share here is that we are multi-hyphenates. We have multiple identities, and the identities go beyond the geographical state. And when we talk about mobility, I would like to discuss this also from this perspective. So here in this, in the session, also in the networking, we connect with our passions, we connect with our skills and our talents. And of course, so if you ask me, I am a local of the Philippines, but I'm also a local of Spain, I'm a local of Austria, I'm a local of Japan, and I'm a local of the United Kingdom. So I think this is important to note when we talk about scientific diasporas and, of course, the brain drain question. In the U.S., for example, when they look at me and I arrive there as a professional, they always think that I am a professional nurse, because many Filipinos go to the United States as a professional nurse. And then later on, they find out that you cannot trust me with a needle or anything sharp. So then, that's an important point to think about. So today, I really would love it if we also discuss beyond brain drain and brain gain, also about brain waste. And what I mean here is those who are forced to work in unregulated jobs or to switch careers because when they go to their host country, their qualifications do not match. So that you have, like, for example, doctors who work as nursing assistants instead or caregivers. You also have those who may have PhD degrees but can't teach in the university because of these qualifications. So it's really brain waste. The other one is also brain overflow, which means there is an oversupply or overeducation of those trained workforce, They can't bring them abroad, and there's too many inside the country because there is a mismatch with the skills. And last, I would also love to talk about brain strain, when there is clearly a negative impact to the sending country, and maybe also to a certain extent to the host institution. But ultimately, because I started to be mobile when I was 18, I did my first mobility in Japan. I think it's also important for sending countries to think that we are not the lost people. You know, they always think that we are lost when we move, that they somehow lost us. We are not lost, because when we return, and eventually we do, maybe temporarily or maybe permanently, we have new ideas, we have new skills, we also have maybe financial assets, not me, but some. So even when we do not return, we are part of diaspora networks such as this one. And so, you know, we enrich, you know, the markets, we enrich the economy, and of course, the global community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jenny. Now, last, let me introduce Slaven. He's far because he has been recently a father, and so he has to take care of the baby. But we have him online, and Slaven Misljncevic works as a policy officer in the Directorate General for Research and Innovation of the European Commission, more specifically in the unit of Research and Innovation Actors and Research Career. He is responsible for several initiatives that contribute to the realization of the European labor market for researchers, notably the development of ReSaver, Pan-European Occupational Pension Fund, ERAHAB's European Year of the Youth, and Euro Access. And moreover, he is responsible for the ongoing work on tackling research and innovation foreign interference. Previously, he worked as a product manager at AXA, where he led the development of new employees' benefit products, and as a business manager at Atneom, where he was responsible for the management of engineering projects, mostly in the field of green energy. Slaven obtained his master's degrees in business engineering at the University of Antwerp and studies as well in China. Slaven, let's see if this works.
I hope it works, and good morning, everyone. I want also to, first of all, to thank the organizers for organizing a session on brain drain, brain gain, or how we usually refer to within the European Commission walls. We usually talk about brain circulation. And this is an extremely important topic. It's also a very complex topic because what have already been said in the introduction and also by Jenny and Carmen, these are several facets of the brain drain, brain gain, brain waste, overflow, strain, name it, discussion, and I hope today we'll be able to structure it well so it is clear how we look at these things. But from the European Commission side, and also Carmen mentioned that we have been talking about this for quite some time, and if you look at the European research area policy over the last 2 decades, it was mostly focusing on tackling barriers to mobility, cross-border mobility, intersectoral mobility, and I think a lot of progress has been made on that front. However, over the last years, the focus has not been on just any type of mobility, but more on this balanced mobility of researchers within the EU borders. And why I think that this topic is very important is also because the timing is very good. So I think that currently there are 2 main policy developments which are really aligned with today's discussion. First of all, we had a very strong political endorsement that the Commission should be working on this topic through the Council conclusions of May 2021, which focused on providing researchers with attractive and sustainable careers and working conditions and making brain circulation a reality. But even more recently, as part of ERA policy agenda, And for those who are not familiar with ERA policy agenda is basically a set of 20 actions on which the European Commission and member states agree to work together on. And one of the actions, notably Action 4, which is about promoting attractiveness of research careers and balanced talent circulation, has been the most popular action of those 20, meaning that most member states voted to be actively involved in this. More concretely, 25 out of 27 member states have showed their interest in being actively involved in this. So this means that while we are talking about improving research careers, brain circulation, a highly complex phenomenon, there seems to be sufficient political courage to actually tackle it. And today we'll talk about challenges, opportunities, but also about what is in the pipeline for the future. And this is where I would be happy to give you more information of what we are currently working on.
Thank you very much. I think these are good news. And well, you can see that we have three experts with very different expertise. I'm sure the discussion today will be very enlightening. So I think we can start with the first question, that is, what are the main challenges we are facing with the brain circulation, brain drain, or the many different brain aspects that Jenny mentioned. So, Carmen, what about your view?
Okay, from my part, because I don't recruit directly researchers, but as I have already mentioned some years ago, I had to analyze the picture of, in this case, my region, but it was the problem of many other countries or regions. So I had to find the obstacles, because, okay, we can find the research, but it's not supposed to be a waste of talent. So what I did was to talk to different agents, and I think it's something very important to collaborate. That's why we are one of the members in the EURACCESS, because at the end we have other colleagues all over, not only Europe, all over the world. Well, but concentrated on that. I saw the picture, I defined that picture, I tried to see the obstacles and then to find the solutions. So depending on the topics that worried the researchers when they were coming, I started finding solutions and bring that information required not only for researchers, but also what I saw is that the host institutions didn't have any idea about how to deal with those international researchers. So it is very important to explain, to advise those host institutions about the correct way, and then to talk to the researcher before arriving in a region, not only the host institution, but in a society, because all of you are not in a place just researching and that's all. I mean, we are coming with families, with partners. What about my friends? So I tried to become a kind of facilitator and facilitate them all those questions that they had in order to start in a new place. Because if not, as I have seen lots of cases, they leave. So imagine, I mean, researching, that's money, and they leave. And that's very negative, and at the end it's a waste of time, waste of talent, waste of everything. So it's very important to create an ecosystem and talk a lot with the public administration, the different agents, with the city council of a city, with the politicians, with lots of people. And that's what we do, try to do our best. And still there are problems, but we will talk about that later on if you like, but I will leave my colleagues.
Certainly the more these practical issues that affects the normal life is the first step.
Yeah, because I have seen if you let me, I will put an example. I remember that there was a research center. They found the proper researcher. She was Italian, and she had a conversation with me. And it was very important to talk to me to say yes or no. And she said, thank you, Carmen, for all the information, but my daughter has a rare disease. And it's not a question because I like the city, I like the research center, I like everything, but I need a hospital that deals with the disease or the illness of my daughter. So at the end, it was no, but I have, so she didn't accept because of that. So imagine if it's important or not. And for her, it was very important to talk to me, because if not, imagine how to manage those expectations at the end.
Yeah.
So, and it was another case, and he said yes, he accepted the offer, just because it was the other way around, because in Bilbao there was a doctor. So imagine, it's just an example, but...
No, the important thing is dealing with the necessities of each one. No? Jenny, what about you?
Yes, I mean, from the area where I was born, or the region where I was born, many people want to do mobility. Like in many cases, also even temporary mobility, to learn more skills, you know, to advance their careers and all that. But of course, there are a lot of restrictions. Of course, administrative restrictions, even finding a host is also one of the restrictions, and thanks to, of course, your access, we're making it much easier, but still there are those. But there is also what you call this moral, persuasion. In most cases, you have to have a return service contract. So in my case, for example, the very first time I left, my first job was in the office of the President of the Republic of the Philippines. So it was reporting to the President herself, who, by the way, recruited me. So when I said, I want to do a master's degree, and then she said, you can do it through the program. But if I do that through the program, so meaning to say it's state-sponsored, for every 6 months that I leave, I would have to give back 2 years. And I didn't want to do that because I was in my early 20s and still wanted to explore the world. So that's one thing, and it's still there, this return service requirement. The other one, of course, is many institutions do not allow, of course, for longer periods of leaving. So that is why in Southeast Asia, many would love to go, to do staff exchanges because it's shorter. And they're allowed to go within that span of time, and then they go back to their institutions. But there is this fear of losing talent still. And also, I think it's the same here as well in Europe, of losing talent. So there has to be a wider conversation as well when you talk about ecosystem, because the ecosystem of the research community is not just the laboratory or the academia and, of course, the project managers, but it's also like, even the tax system, the tax people is has a very important role to play. Those who are doing pensions, for example, even the local government units also have to be part of the conversation. So there has to be this inclusive environment on discussions such as this. We have to have business people in the room, for example. We have to have mayors in the room as well, and tax experts as well, and insurance experts. Another thing that I wanted to share, because Slaven opened this discussion about political courage. And it's also about political courage on both sides of the coin, especially because of this question on who is a migrant and who is an expat, right? Like with the politics of the skin, to make us reasonably disturbed, I'm not considered an expat, I'm considered a migrant. But for others with another face, they're considered an expat, right? And the reason, the distinction is important because if you talk about an expat, then you talk about education, high education, you talk about privilege as well, and also contributions to the country. But when you talk about migrants, somehow there is this fear, right? And there is this talk about, this discomfort about mobility. And I think we have to also when we talk about job security and we talk about brain circulation, we also have to talk about these things, talking about courage.
Thank you, Jenny. It's funny because my experience was a bit the opposite. My government sent me 4 years to Australia, nice fellowship. I returned, I didn't have any right, or it took me, as she said, 2 years to convalidate the PhD I did in Australia, so I could opt for a position here in research.
Yeah.
It's like, it was, well, the endogamy at the university at that time was 99%, I would say. So it was very difficult for those people going out to return. So they have to make a special program for returning scientists that we were sent to abroad. No? So,
just jumping on that, Carmen, because I also had the same experience. When I did my Erasmus and I wanted to go home and give back to the Philippines where I was born, I was not accepted because the Commission on Higher Education said my master's does not exist because it is not in their list. And so I cannot be given the same level of, this point system, in my country. And that was very difficult because then I could not be hired, in that level. And I talked to, of course, the Secretary of Commission on Higher Education at that time. I went to legal. I actually had to face lawyers for this because they say, well, the EU is, having this program, but in our list it doesn't exist. So.
When I arrived to Australia, they only have to look at the table and say, agriculture engineer, University of Córdoba, okay, directly to PhD. And I was with a colleague from England and said, master in London, sorry, you have to do the master again. So they have a very clear, very pragmatic perspective, compared to here. But things have evolved, and that's the important part, that now I think it's better. Let's see what Slaven can tell us about his view on the challenges.
Well, if you look at the challenges of balanced talent circulation, or to put it differently, why are some regions, countries or regions affected by brain drain? Well, like I said, this is quite a complex and multifaceted issue, and from the European Commission side, more specifically from Director General for Research Innovation, we have tried to structure these big issues into subcategories, I would say. So currently, if you talk about the challenges of brain drain or triggers of brain drain, we put them in 4 main categories. And first one has already been quite discussed by the speakers. So it mostly has to do with the recruitment, with the working conditions and the career progression. So for example, if you look at recruitment, there is often a lack of open, transparent, clear and merit-based recruitment processes. There can be language-related limitations as well. But it's not just about recruitment, it's also about career progression and working conditions. For example, there is often a lack of recognition of research profession and researchers' career paths. The researcher positions are quite unstable, as well as the overall career paths. There is often a lack of transparency and objective evaluation and appraisal for career progression in some countries, insufficient remuneration, access to social security rights, pension rights, for example, and other working conditions might not be as appealing as in some other regions, in this case, in Europe. So I would say this is the first big category which relates to recruitment and working conditions. And this is often, I would say, this is also the topic that is most frequently discussed. However, we also have to acknowledge that the issue of brain drain is part of a much larger issue that has to do with the performance of, I would say, of RNA systems in Europe, and that's why we often talk about system-level factors for research and innovation. as part of this big category of system-level factors for R&I, we are thinking of R&D funding and strategies and instruments, for example, such as lack of long-term R&D strategy, lack of long-term sufficient and stable funding, instability of instruments, but also about the governance of these system-level factors. Think of inefficient coordination between decision makers at a different level. Think of governance-related limitations at, for example, country level, at education, at institutional level. Think of the institutional design, for example, where we often see multi-level settings with overlapping competences, but also how these ecosystems or systems, national systems, for example, are connected with other national systems. So also the collaboration with the broader ecosystems is also quite important, and of course the involvement of private sector investments in R&D. So this is the second big category of issues that we need to tackle if we want to contribute to this balanced mobility. Third one, which is a smaller one, and I would say even less discussed, which is about the research environment. Here we are thinking of limited access to infrastructure and of equipment, limited or insufficient funding for research projects, or limited access to training. And finally, the fourth category is about research excellence, where we see that there might be sufficient quality or quantity of research output, limited number of excellent internationally recognized institutions in some countries, etc., etc. While these are the four main categories of issues, we have also listed an additional, what we call other factors that are triggering brain drain, such as xenophobic discourses, resistance to change, economic crisis, etc., etc. And some of this has also been discussed by previous speakers. So nevertheless, it's a quite a complex issue that we are trying to categorize or to structure in something which is much more understandable for the general public, and which will also help us when we look at how can we facilitate brain circulation, that to have initiatives that are actually to make sure that we don't miss any of these challenges.
Thanks very much, Slaven. I think that's essential, having this coordination. Do we have any question about this block of discussion on the challenges? Or online? Is there any question online?
Or comments?
Or comments, yeah. Okay. Let's move, because we are short of time. Maybe we can combine your comments on the positive issues and the future, and then we close with a summary of the future. Is that okay? Carmen, do you want to comment on how do you see that?
Well, my feeling, or well, it's not a feeling or sensation, is like this. I mean, there are a lot of, I think that more and more people in general, I mean, I'm talking about different agents, are more aware about this. We are just talking about topics, important topics, and I advise you, if you're moving, if I can give a recommendation, Helena, is that before moving to another country, you do not only look at okay, this is a great laboratory. You must analyze, okay, if you are going to that country with your family, on your own, the language, the system, because, I mean, you cannot complain. I mean, it is true, this is a real fact, that different member states have different systems. There are some common things in the European Union, but it's like that. I mean, and for example, in this case, the European Commission is making efforts in order to facilitate some topics like of the social security, about pensions and all those things, but still every member state has their own system. So it is very important that before going to the official sources, because I have seen in years that sometimes you are not well advised and you have or there are too much information. I don't know what is the problem, because, for example, if you go to the Your Access members, you can see what institutions or what members are there in order to contact those people before moving. And it is important not to listen to friends or whatever. It is important, again, to go to the office, because I have seen lots of problems if they do not talk to the correct person. It is very important to understand the place you are going. Because again, we are saying about that. I mean, it's not a question of, you are not going to be in a laboratory 100% of your time. And I think that one of the solutions, apart from the initiative of the Your Access, is to find facilitators in every region. Because even in a country, for example, we are in Spain, so Spain, it's not the same, the north, the south, we cannot generalize because we even have our own peculiarities. So, I say now to the Commission or whatever, or even the Spanish government or the French government or whatever, that is very important to involve, again, not only researchers or research centers, but also the society, that we forget about that, because as you have been saying, expat migrants, and it's very important because it's not the same, I mean, it's like that. So, one of the solutions that we found was the creation of that service, and I'm not the university, I'm not the company, I'm not it's just a common person who guides you in your path, integrating you. So I don't know if it could be, in some other countries there are people like me, but I think it is, you're unique. It can be a solution.
Certainly, it can help. Jenny?
Just let me, Helena, and another thing, it is very important, again, that even you have been mentioned, the nationals. Imagine, everybody is national in their own country. If you're moving back to your country, after so many years, in my case, I attend Spanish people as well. Because after 10 or 20 years, they have no idea about that. So don't think, no, I'm Catalonian, I'm from Madrid, or I'm from Córdoba, I'm Basque, I know everything. No, they don't.
I agree.
And sometimes, for example, can I say, Marta?
Yeah.
For example, Marta has an international PhD. What happens if she wants to do her career in Spain? So I will tell her what to do. You like it or not, there are solutions, but for example, do I have to recognize my PhD certificate title? Can I work even if I have international So there are new laws in Spain, for example, and it is important to understand the system.
It is good to know about these institutions and this help that the European Commission, community, and the countries are putting together. Because I learned about the homologation of the through Twitter. I mean, I read it on Twitter, and that's why when I started to like what is happening, what had happened, and I forgot completely what I had to deal with when I went to Italy to do my PhD. I mean, it was something left in the back of my mind, and then you were like, oh my gosh, yeah, I did to do the A stamp and all of these things. And then, I don't know, it was like discovering another world.
And Helena has mentioned as well, okay, here everything is fine. No, here I need a master's degree. Here is not valid. Here, so it's not only one country, it means all of us. I mean,
yeah, it's all these administrative issues can be simplified enormously, and I think we go in the right direction, but it takes time.
Yeah.
Jenny?
Yeah, so I'll start with gratitude because, with the Marie Skłodowska Curie Actions, I did my fellowship in the UK, when UK was still a part of us. And I got pregnant and then had my baby in Spain. So my daughter was born in Barcelona. And so, on one hand, it was an opening as well on the kind of support that member states, within the European Union was able to give to scientists, third country scientists. So that I appreciated a lot. Well, one thing that is now, I question moving forward is we are also producing, and Slaven just produced one, produced global citizens. They live in a world that, yes, there are still questions about mobility, but on the other hand, they also will face questions on the kind of jobs that they will have, which are not visible, during our time. So, of course, everybody knows about ChatGPT here. Technological singularity is already in the air. So there are questions, with the next generation of scientists and researchers that we also have to deal with as we also improve the systems that are in the different regions when it comes to the scientific and research community. So I think what we need now are roadmaps. The roadmap of right now to create this inclusive ecosystem, but also a roadmap of the future with the next generation of scientific diasporas, if you could call it that. So, I always say we have to bloom where we are planted, right? And we have to always, find, our tribe. And you see the changes that are now happening. A few weeks ago, I was told that the Prime Minister of Vietnam did a mobility in Romania and speaks Romanian very fluently. So you can imagine, the leaders also of, in different parts of the world, they did mobility schemes. They probably did Marie Curie. One of my very close friends is now the Deputy Ambassador of Vietnam in India. So, also within this sphere of, influence when it comes to scientific discussions and also of research and mobility. So, we talk about brain circulation. We also have to talk about brain networking and brain exchange. And I think we are on the right track, but we have to also expand the conversation.
Yeah, thanks. Very good points. Slaven?
Thank you. So, perhaps just to start with a reminder. So, if we actually want to have, so it's very important to have political endorsement there, and it's also what Jenny spoke about, and I as well in my introductory remarks. Of course, you must have also a budget behind this, because as I showed that this is a quite complex problem that we need to fight on different fronts. So regarding the budget, first of all, one of the novelties of Horizon Europe was the fact that the widening component of Horizon Europe budget has been really beefed up. So the widening dimension of Horizon Europe is approximately 3 billion euros. So that's the first thing. Second point is that if you look at the Marie Curie, under the Horizon Europe, we also have a budget of 6.6 billion with several new incentives that aim to boost intersectoral cooperation, but also to support a more balanced brain circulation as well. So I think the first important thing is to say, okay, there is actually funding. Is it sufficient to solve everything? Probably not, but nevertheless, it's a significant increase compared to the past, which allow us, from the Commission side, also the member states and the regions, to actually work on some of the issues that are triggering brain drain. Now, this is the budget side. Of course, what I said, one of the most important and most frequently discussed categories of issues fall under this improving the attractiveness of research careers. And in this context, there are a couple of new several policy developments, but also the reinforcement of the existing initiatives. One of the existing initiatives that is out there for almost 2 decades is Your Access. It will also be reinforced in the future. If you are a researcher and, for example, you're interested in moving to another country, Jenny and Carmen spoke about many issues they have seen. There is a network of support for you, and I think while the brain drain discussion is often policy oriented. I hope that after today's discussion, you will at least remember your access and as a potential solution for some of the practical problems you might encounter in case you will be mobile, especially if you are cross-border mobile. So on one hand, we want to enforce the existing initiatives such as your access by adding additional services, tools, making it much more user-friendly, etc., etc., etc. We are also expanding a pan-European pension scheme called Resaver, which is now the first pan-European pension fund actually active in Spain and in the other seven countries. And we are also revising currently the Charter and Code for Researchers. Maybe you heard about it. It's a very important document published back in 2005. And currently we are modernizing it with elements of, for example, gender equality, open science, etc. And it will be published again. And consequently also the HRS4R award will be changed as well, which eventually should result in slightly improved attractiveness of a research career eventually. So these are the existing initiatives. What is actually new in the pipeline? So first of all, we want to have a better monitoring mechanism of mobility within Europe. For that reason, we are currently developing together with OECD an observatory on research careers. In the past, we have done this through ad hoc surveys called MORE study. More surveys, there were 4 in the past, but now we want to have a much more modern approach to data gathering and analysis through almost automatic and continuous dashboard, which will look at, for example, cross-border mobility, intersector mobility. It will give us better insight in the regions affected by brain drain, by the issues as well, but also, for example, it will give us a better insight in the skills needed, in the supply of skills, in the demand for certain skills or certain profiles, in employment conditions, and social security levels, etc., etc. So hopefully also this will in the future allow better policy or evidence-based policy making both on national, local and European levels. So this is, I would say, this is the one novelty, and hopefully it will be operational next year. Most probably the entrance to this observatory will be public to everyone through the existing Euraccess website. Secondly, we are developing a European framework for research careers. This is not the first time we are doing this. This has been done as well in 2012, when the levels R1, R2, R3, R4 have been developed and agreed upon. Now we are going actually a next step where we are trying to gather as many issues as possible and to have a comprehensive approach to tackle them. For example, here we are looking at the recognition of researchers and their profession. There are several measures to reduce precarity. There are several measures in place or that are in the pipeline to foster more intersectoral and interoperable careers. It's about reinforcing social protection for mobile researchers, etc., etc. So definitely the European Framework for Research Careers is something that you should keep an eye on, and hopefully it will be adopted by the end of this year. And as I said, this is a lot of this. Most of the current work does focus on this first category, which is about improving the attractiveness of research careers. However, we also have several initiatives that relate to the improvement of how ecosystems function within the EU. Of course, a lot is being done through the Next Gen EU funding, and a lot of member states have used these resources, these financial resources, to modernize and to upgrade their national RNI systems. Also from the Commission's side, and also as part of ERA policy agenda, we have launched an initiative called ERA Hubs that aims at better interconnecting local ecosystems across Europe, so to make sure that actually the ecosystems are not always very place-based in certain regions, but they're also interconnected with other cross-border ecosystems, and also hopefully this should also have an indirect impact on improving, on, for example, the remuneration levels, collaborations, the fact that several of these structures should be operational in widening countries without having to move to non-widening countries, etc., etc. So this is what is currently in the pipeline. Like I said, this is currently really a hot topic. So I think if this topic will be discussed in 1 year time at the next annual conference, then I'm sure that we'll be able to give you an update on what is currently in the pipeline, or if to which extent the objectives have been met. But also I expect new developments on this front, as we are really trying to utilize the momentum that currently we have on this topic.
Thanks very much, Slaven. I think we can have some questions now. Please introduce yourself before making the question.
Hello. Yeah. Hello, I'm Javier Pardo. I just finished my PhD at the University of Oxford in bioinformatics, and I'm also here representing Society of Spanish Researchers in the UK. And I want to ask again about one topic that you have briefly discussed, that is the validity of the university titles obtained outside certain countries. For example, in my case, my PhD from the UK is not valid in Spain. So, is the Commission, it's a question for the representative of the European Commission, is the Commission planning to have, to harmonize the situation so that PhD titles, in this case, or master titles obtained in different countries of the EU or outside of the EU are valid in all the EU in order to make easy the mobility of researchers? Thank you very much.
Maybe, Slaven, can you comment on the harmonization on these issues among countries? Is there any activity from the EU on this?
So, first of all, we have to acknowledge the fact that we all know that we are in a current war on talent, a global war on talent, and harmonization and making it easier for global talents to find opportunities in Europe is one of our core ambitions. This can be done either through practical initiatives. We have, for example, January that is involved in access worldwide, but also through policy discussions as well. So on one hand, we do have the multilateral dialogues with a set of countries that aims at better harmonizing the recognition of diplomas. So either it's about having multilateral agreements in place, but also, I would say perhaps even more often, it is about facilitating the procedures how these diplomas, for example, are being recognized. Often we see that they are perhaps unnecessarily complex, very bureaucratic, take a lot of time, require a lot of effort, which might demotivate a researcher that might, for example, be very interested in working in Europe. Regarding the UK specifically, there is a lot of demand to harmonize this. When it comes to academia, the European universities from Europe and from UK continue to collaborate with each other. There are so many, there are endless structures in which European and UK universities are collaborating on almost a daily basis. And of course, when you collaborate, you also want to have easier exchange of staff as well. But also we also must acknowledge the high mobility of researchers between the EU and the UK. However, following the Brexit, as you know, a lot of things have been how can I say, the EU and the UK have taken a step back on several things, and I think since the official date when the UK left the EU, there has been several attempts to approach each other on this topic as well. There have been mostly successful. However, to which extent there will be a short-term solution for UK researchers moving to Europe and the other way around is something that I cannot inform you about at this stage.
Okay, thank you. Nadia?
Thank you very much to all the speakers. I'm Anife from Bulgaria chapter. And we already have in Bulgaria several cases for Bulgarians that return to Bulgaria, found a company or have a project. And although they are Bulgarians, they face some local difficulties. And my question is to Carmen, because you gave several examples how you offered help by giving advice. What I face in our group is that people are afraid to ask for help. And you cannot give help by force. Yeah, you should be asked for. And I try to, now listening to all of your experience and ideas, how I can provide this help service, or how Marta mentioned Twitter. Can you give some advice how we can provide help and make people ask for help? I'm afraid that they are afraid to ask for help. Researchers are somehow very oriented, solve problems by themselves, find solution, and are afraid to ask for help. Did you face such problem, and do you have solutions?
Thank you. It's very interesting and it's real. In my case, in my personal experience, as a facilitator, it has good things. That, okay, I support, first of all, I have to talk to the different research centers, but knocking at the door, hi, hello, if a researcher is coming, here I am. I'm not joking. So I have to talk to the university, I have to talk to the different research centers, to the companies, make them think, because sometimes they are in their world and they think that it's not important. So I have to be very, not pressing, but come on, this is going to be, I have to sell the recruiters or the IPs, telling them or create protocols in order to tell the researchers before coming, and even telling them when you are negotiating, in inverted commas, okay, are you coming, you are not coming, you are joining to this, it doesn't matter, tell them to talk to me. Put them in contact, I provide with information or whatever, and just, to connect Zoom, Teams, whatever, and explain to them about that. But it is true that sometimes researchers themselves, they do not want to ask. I don't know why. And they are trying to solve the problems, and then they arrive, they come to me with a problem that they created a big problem when it was not a problem. I don't know if I'm explaining myself. So it's very important to create protocols or ways of collaborating. But at the end, if I let me tell you this, it's a question of the person. Sometimes, perhaps, in universities or research centers, they do not choose the proper person or the person with some soft skills to understand the researchers. And it's very important that that person is supposed to have a very broadened vision to understand and to provide the correct information. After many years, sorry, I still have problems.
I can imagine. Thanks very much, Carmen. Is there any last question?
If there is time for one, I have a curiosity question. So we're hearing a lot in this conference about transparency in general as not only an instrument for accountability, but also to build this reputation system that empowers researchers, for instance, usually segregated against on gender-based or ethnicity, to empower them to be able to choose the universities that offer them better working conditions, more consideration, better career paths. But I was thinking, hearing you now, that usually, and maybe it's a misunderstanding on my side, but institutions and organizations able to offer that ecosystem are usually in countries where there are usually more means. So I'm wondering if how much the opinion of maybe Slaven on whether this is a good instrument to boost inclusiveness and diversity in universities, but what would be the impact of organizations in some countries where they don't have enough financial means to ensure that ecosystem, would it impact them negatively in terms of brain circulation?
Yes, Slaven?
Yes, that's actually a very good question. So, on one hand, it is important that the means are increased, right? From the Commission side, we are now arguing for very long that the investment in R&I should get to 3% of GDP, and we are still not there yet. So I think on one hand, the means have to be increased. Of course, there's still going to be, I think, even if the widening countries, and they are currently increasing, the rate in which the widening countries are increasing their means or the allocation of resources to R&I is proportionally higher compared to non-widening countries. However, this difference will remain to exist. While we still see the need for this open and transparent recruitment, is the fact that researchers, and this isn't just for research, also some other professionals, and just any profession in general, I would say, is that it is not usually only about number of euros somebody is earning per month. It's often about the type of project, it's about the working environment, it is about other benefits, it is about the height of the local costs and related to the purchase, the purchasing power that you actually have in these resources. It is about, maybe it could be about the climate, the availability of education, availability of certain specialized doctors in some rare diseases, etc., etc., etc. So I want to say, by making the recruitment more transparent, it should not result in simply visualizing much better the gap in remuneration structures between countries where they have plenty of or more resources compared to countries where they have a stronger shortage of resources. I think it is important to also, if I may say, use the word compete on different fronts as well, like as the type of projects, as access to infrastructures, the local environment, working conditions, employment conditions in general that go beyond the pure brutto salary.
Okay.
Do you have time for more?
Last question?
Okay.
Could be maybe a comment. Murat Güneş, chair of BSP working group. I think the main idea that calling a problem would be also, as for me, would be like a wrong approach. I would call it a challenge because it can be a problem for someone but not for the other ones. And main goal would be in 4 levels: European level, national level, institutional level, and personal level. So I think each one of them has responsibilities. It's not a good idea to blame someone or taking out the other. I think the responsibilities should be evaluated from top down and up down, approach, and that could be a solution, at least for short term.
Thanks. I think it's a very good comment for ending this session, because certainly there are issues at different scales. We have to be aware of them. They are not independent, they are linked, and we should be aware of that. We should be aware also that we are scientists, or most of us, or in the world of science, and also the meaning of science for the development of the society, or even if you are in an enterprise. And also remember how for southern countries, this can be very bad problem, the brain drain, and how important is that the returning, as Carmen mentioned, the cases of nationals coming back, how important is that for the development of the society? And I think it's important that each country has good policies at different level of these scales that you have mentioned. And I think the European Union goes in the right way. Important is that we have improved, at least I'm quite old, so from when I started to now, I think the things have improved a lot, and that's important, but we still have a lot of work to do. So I thank you, all of you. I thank also the speakers. Thanks to Slaven that found the time to be with us. Thanks to Jenny, that is her birthday today.
Happy birthday, Jenny.
And the organizers. Thanks a lot.
And thank you, Helena.
Thank you very much, everyone.